Hello, I'm Philip Mugglestone, and in this series of videos we're covering the R integration for SAP HANA. In the previous video we saw how to install R and rserve on a Linux server. Now if you've already got that done, the next step is to configure HANA to be able to talk to that server. So there are some settings within HANA that are part of the calculation engine which actually allow HANA to talk to an R server. So we need to use HANA Studio to then configure these settings. If you already have an R server, then of course you still need to use HANA Studio to configure the settings so that HANA knows where that R server is, what port it's on, and how to talk to it. So let's now go back into the system and look at configuring the settings within HANA. We're going to use HANA Studio to configure the settings for our integration. But before that, just a couple of things we need to know. First one is where is our R server, and the second one is which port is R server running on. Now, from our example before, we can see that actually on this IP address we have our server which has got R with it, and when we started our rserve process we used port 30020. So that's what we'll use in this example. If you already have a different environment, then of course ask your system administrator to find out what the IP address and port number for rserve would be. So let's go into HANA Studio. Now the first thing we need to do in HANA Studio is perform some configuration. So let's go to the configuration options, and here in the configurations tab we're here as a system user. We need to add 3 specific new parameters, if they're not already existing, to enable HANA to work with an R server or more than one R server. We go to the index server ini, and within that the calc engine. And we see here there are no options, there are no settings here that begin with CER underscore. And that's settings we're going to do. If you were to find them here, then it might mean that R has already been configured from this HANA server. So the 3 settings that we need to add are documented in the guide for our integration with SAP HANA. However, let's go through and manually add them right now. So we're going to add 3 different values. Now the first one is called the rserve addresses. So we're going to prefix with CER underscore rserve underscore addresses. And this is where we can list one or more addresses where we can find an R server. Now, if you want to have high availability, if you want to have more than one R server, you can do that. You can then HANA will talk to each one individually and optimize which is the best one to speak to. Otherwise, you can have a single R server. In our case, we'll have a single server. So let's remind ourselves of the IP address. In fact, we can copy and paste. We can go to this IP address here, which we found in our hosts file, and we can just paste that in. But we also need to add the port number. And as we recall, when we set it up with our superuser R user, we use port 30020. So that's the port number we need to specify here. 30020. If we want to have more than one server, we would delimit them using a comma. However, in this case, we've got just one. What we now need to do is add the second key value pair, and this one we're going to call the CER underscore timeout. And this is where you specify in seconds how long you want a specific R request to run before it times out. Now 300 seconds is our recommended default, which is actually 5 minutes. However, if you have tasks you think may run longer than 5 minutes, then you would need to increase this number. The third and final setting is what's called the CER underscore rserve underscore max send size. This is the maximum amount of data that R will send back to HANA during some processing. And the default, or what we would probably recommend initially, is to set that to 0, which means it's unlimited. However, if you're experiencing issues and you're getting a lot of information that you may not want being sent back to HANA, then you could set that to a certain amount of memory. So those are the 3 settings. We click on Finish to save, and now we see that these 3 settings have been configured within the Calc Engine area. So we should now be good to go in working with our server from our HANA system. Now, just as a test, I have just a little example. Now, I'm not going to explain the code at this point. That will come in future videos. But I'm just going to run this example, which actually creates a procedure that performs a k-means within R on the customers dataset that we've seen in many examples before, particularly with the predictive analysis library. And we're going to just create that procedure and then call it just to check that our serve mechanism is functioning. So let's just run the code. And we can see everything's run fine. We've got our output results here, our results table. We can see that the procedure has run and he's actually added us a couple of new columns into our data. We've got for each customer the cluster that's been assigned, the cluster number between 1 and 5, and we've got the confidence of that, which is also respected of the silhouette value. So we can just quickly see here technically that the code has run. We've had no errors, so we're able to communicate with the R server that we've already set up. So that's it for configuring HANA to work with R.